No one believed in her. Reba McEntire, cover singer, is humiliated during audition, but what happens next leaves everyone speechless. The sound of shattering dreams echoes differently for everyone. For Lucy Jenkins, it came in the form of a coffee mug hitting the linoleum floor of Murphy's Diner at exactly 6:43 on a Tuesday morning, spilling the last drops of hope she had been clinging to for the past 15 years. "Lucy, table 7 is still waiting for their eggs," shouted Frank Murphy from behind the greasy counter, his voice cutting through the morning chatter of truckers and early commuters. Lucy bent down to pick up the ceramic pieces, her red hair falling across her face like a curtain hiding the tears that threatened to spill. At 35, she had perfected the art of crying silently while serving pancakes and refilling coffee cups. The diner sat on the outskirts of Nashville, Tennessee, where broken dreams came to die a slow death among the smell of bacon grease and unfulfilled promises. Lucy had been working there for 8 years, ever since her ex-husband Jake had decided that being a father and husband was too much responsibility for his free spirit. He left on a Thursday, taking nothing but his guitar and the last remnants of Lucy's faith in fairy tale endings. "Coming right up, Mr. Henderson," Lucy called out to table 7, forcing her signature smile, the one she had practiced in the mirror until it looked genuine, even when her heart was breaking. She hurried to the kitchen, her worn sneakers squeaking against the floor, and grabbed the plate of over-easy eggs that had been sitting under the heat lamp. As she walked between the tables, something magical happened. Without even realizing it, Lucy began humming Fancy under her breath, her voice naturally falling into the distinctive tone and cadence that had made Reba McEntire a legend. The melody seemed to transform the dreary atmosphere of the diner, and slowly, conversations began to quiet as patrons turned to listen. "Sweet Lord, Lucy, you sound just like her," whispered Betty Lou, an elderly regular who came in every morning for black coffee and wheat toast. Just like Reba herself. Lucy felt her cheeks flush. This happened everywhere she went. Grocery stores, church gatherings, even at her son Tommy's school events. People would stop mid-conversation when they heard her speak, then beg her to sing something, anything, in that voice that seemed to channel the Queen of Country herself. But what good was sounding like a superstar when you were trapped serving Eggs Benedict to people living the dreams you could only sing about? Lucy had 2 children to feed. Tommy, who was 12 and needed new soccer cleats, and little Sarah, who was 8, and asked every night when Mommy was going to be on television like the singers she heard on the radio. Hey there, friends. Before we continue with Lucy's incredible journey, I just want to take a moment to connect with all of you amazing people watching from wherever you are in the world. If you're enjoying this story and want to see more heartwarming tales like this one, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps us bring you more inspiring content. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me what you think about Lucy's situation so far, and let me know what state or country you're watching from. Your support means everything to us, and I read every single comment. The lunch rush was particularly brutal that day. Lucy's feet ached in her old sneakers, and her lower back screamed from hours of bending over tables and carrying heavy trays. But it was during her 10-minute break, sitting alone in the storage room behind stacks of napkins and ketchup bottles, that everything changed. Her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Maria, who worked as a receptionist at a small recording studio downtown. The message was simple, but it might as well have been written in gold. "Lucy, there's a casting call for a huge country tribute show. They're looking for tribute artists to perform alongside some big names. Auditions are next week in Los Angeles. You have to try." Lucy's hands trembled as she read the text again. Then again, Los Angeles, the place where dreams either came true or went to die spectacular deaths. She had exactly $463 in her savings account, money she had been setting aside for Tommy's dental work and Sarah's school supplies. But what if this was it? What if this was the chance she had been waiting for since she was 16 years old, singing into her hairbrush in front of her bedroom mirror, pretending she was on the Grand Ole Opry stage? Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. It was her mother, Eleanor, calling from the small apartment where she watched Lucy's children every day after school. "Lucy, honey, Tommy's soccer coach called. They need the registration fee for the tournament by Friday or he can't play." Lucy closed her eyes. $150. Money she didn't have, for a tournament that might help her son get noticed by high school scouts. Money that could also buy her a plane ticket to Los Angeles and maybe, just maybe, change everything. "I'll figure it out, Mom," she whispered into the phone, though she had no idea how. That night, after putting the children to bed with promises of bedtime stories and reassurances that everything would be okay, Lucy sat at her kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills. The numbers didn't lie. She was broke, tired, and running out of time to make something of herself. But then she looked at the guitar in the corner of the room, her grandfather's 1967 Martin acoustic, the one he had taught her to play when she was just 7 years old. The one that had been her companion through heartbreak and hope, through lullabies for her babies, and late-night dreams of stages and spotlights. The guitar was worth at least $800, maybe more to the right collector. It would cover the plane ticket, a cheap hotel room, and the audition fee, with enough left over for Tommy's tournament. Lucy picked up her phone and searched for local music stores, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Tomorrow she would call in sick to work. Tomorrow she would sell the one thing that connected her to her musical roots. Tomorrow she would buy a plane ticket to Los Angeles and bet everything on a dream that everyone told her was too late to chase. As she held the guitar one last time, running her fingers over the worn strings that had heard 1,000 songs and absorbed 1,000,000 tears, Lucy made a promise to herself. Win or lose, she would give this audition everything she had. She would sing with the voice of a woman who had loved, lost, struggled, and survived. She would sing with the heart of a mother fighting for her children's future and her own forgotten dreams. The next morning, as Frank Murphy screamed about her calling in sick during the breakfast rush, Lucy was already at Peterson's music store, watching a stranger hand her $800 in exchange for the guitar that had been her voice when she had no words. With shaking hands, she used her phone to book a flight to Los Angeles, departing in 3 days. 3 days to prepare for the audition that would either launch her into the career she had always dreamed of, or send her back to Murphy's diner with nothing but the memory of what might have been. But Lucy Jenkins had learned something important in her 35 years of living. Sometimes you have to lose everything you think you need to find everything you never knew you wanted. As she walked out of the music store with cash in her pocket and tears in her eyes, she had no idea that in less than a week she would be face to face with her idol, sharing a moment that would change both their lives forever. The plane ticket was booked. The audition was scheduled. All that was left was to find out if dreams really do come true, or if they just break your heart in more creative ways. The airplane seat felt like a throne of possibilities and a chair of terror all at once. Lucy pressed her face against the small window, watching Nashville disappear beneath the clouds, taking with it everything familiar and safe. Her hands clutched a worn manila folder containing her audition materials, a headshot taken at the local mall photography studio, a resume that seemed painfully thin, and sheet music for 3 Reba McEntire songs that she could perform with her eyes closed. "First time to Los Angeles?" asked the businessman sitting next to her, noticing her white knuckles gripping the armrest. "Yes," Lucy replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm going to audition for a tribute show." The man smiled politely and returned to his laptop, probably assuming she was just another small-town dreamer heading to Hollywood to get her heart broken. He wasn't wrong. Lucy could feel her heart already cracking with each mile that separated her from her children. Before leaving, she had knelt down in front of Tommy and Sarah, trying to explain why Mommy had to go away for a few days. Tommy, wise beyond his 12 years, had simply hugged her tight and whispered, "Go show them how good you are, Mom." Sarah, with tears in her 8-year-old eyes, had made Lucy promise to call every night and sing her to sleep over the phone. The promise felt heavier than the airplane itself. LAX airport was a maze of chaos that made Nashville's small terminal look like a quiet library. Lucy dragged her single suitcase through crowds of people who all seemed to know exactly where they were going, while she consulted her phone GPS every few steps. The shuttle to her budget hotel took 45 minutes through traffic that moved slower than the line at Murphy's diner on Sunday mornings. The Sunshine Motel lived up to its name, only in the flickering neon sign out front. Lucy's room was small, clean enough, and smelled faintly of disinfectant and broken dreams, but it had a mirror and that was all she needed. She hung up her audition outfit, a red sequined dress she had found at a thrift store, and altered herself to match one of Reba's iconic looks from the 80s. That first night in Los Angeles, Lucy barely slept. She practiced her songs in whispers, not wanting to disturb the other guests, and called home 3 times to check on the kids. Her mother, Eleanor, sounded tired but encouraging. "You've got this, honey," Eleanor said during their final call of the evening. "You've been preparing for this your whole life, even when you didn't know it." The next morning arrived grey and smoggy, nothing like the sunny California Lucy had imagined. She took the bus to the Paramount Theatre, where the auditions were being held. The building was magnificent, old Hollywood glamour with marble columns and gold detailing that spoke of dreams made real. But the line of hopefuls stretching around the block told a different story. Hundreds of tribute artists waited their turn, each one polished, professional, and intimidatingly confident. Lucy saw Elvis impersonators with perfect pompadours, Dolly Parton lookalikes with elaborate wigs and costumes that probably cost more than Lucy's monthly rent, and Johnny Cash, tributes in black from head to toe. "Honey, you look lost," said a woman with platinum blonde hair piled high and enough rhinestones to blind a satellite. She was clearly a Dolly tribute, complete with the accent and mannerisms. "First time auditioning for Marcus Reynolds?" Lucy nodded, clutching her folder tighter. "I'm doing Reba McEntire." The woman's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been pity crossing her heavily made-up features. "Oh, sweetie, you picked a tough one. Marcus doesn't like the country queens much. Says we're all trying too hard to be something we're not." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "And between you and me, he's got a thing about age. Thinks anyone over 25 is washed up." Lucy's stomach dropped. At 35, she was ancient by those standards. "But don't let that discourage you," the woman continued, though her tone suggested Lucy should be very discouraged indeed. "Sometimes miracles happen. I'm Candy, by the way. This is my 4th audition with Marcus, still hoping he'll give me a shot. 4 auditions, 4 rejections." Lucy wondered how many women like Candy were in this line, how many dreams Marcus Reynolds had crushed with his particular brand of Hollywood cruelty. The wait was excruciating. Hours passed as the line inched forward with the speed of a funeral procession. Lucy listened to snippets of conversations around her, stories of previous auditions, gossip about which tribute shows were successful, bitter complaints about the industry, and how impossible it was to break through without connections. By the time Lucy's number was called, it was nearly 4 in the afternoon. She had been standing for over 6 hours, her feet aching in the heels she rarely wore, her throat dry from nerves and the Los Angeles smog. Her red sequined dress, which had looked so perfect in her motel room mirror, now felt garish and cheap under the harsh theatre lights. "Number 247, called a bored-looking assistant with a clipboard. "Lucy Jenkins." This was it. Lucy walked through the theatre doors into a space that should have been magical, but felt like a courtroom. The ornate ceiling and velvet seats were lost in shadow, with harsh work lights illuminating only the stage where she would perform. At a folding table in the middle of the empty theatre sat 3 people who held her future in their hands. Marcus Reynolds was exactly what Lucy had expected. Mid-50s, silver hair slicked back, wearing an expensive suit and an expression of perpetual annoyance. The other 2 judges were younger, a man and a woman who looked like they had been hired more for their aesthetic appeal than their musical knowledge. "State your name and what you'll be performing," Marcus said without looking up from his phone. "Lucy Jenkins," she said, her voice carrying surprisingly well in the empty space. "I'll be performing Fancy by Reba McEntire." Marcus finally looked up, and Lucy immediately regretted choosing this particular song. His eyes traveled from her face to her dress to her shoes and back again, taking inventory of everything he found lacking. The female judge whispered something to her companion, who smirked in response. "Another Reba tribute," Marcus said with the enthusiasm of someone announcing a root canal. "How original. Let me guess. You're from Nashville, you've been singing in bars, and you think you've got what it takes to make it in the big leagues." The words stung because they were true, but Lucy lifted her chin. "I've been performing for 15 years, sir. I've developed my own interpretation of—" "Just sing," Marcus interrupted with a wave of his hand. "We don't have all day." Lucy walked to the center of the stage, her heels clicking against the wooden floor like a countdown to execution. She had performed this song hundreds of times, in dive bars and church halls, at birthday parties and local festivals. She knew every note, every breath, every emotional beat that made Fancy one of Reba's most powerful songs. But as she opened her mouth to begin, Marcus Reynolds spoke again. "Wait," he said, leaning back in his chair with a laugh that held no humor. "Seriously? Another middle-aged waitress trying to relive someone else's glory days?" He looked at his fellow judges who were now paying attention with the cruel interest of spectators at a car crash. "How old are you, sweetheart?" 35, 40, 35, Lucy managed, her voice smaller than she intended. 35 and still chasing fantasies, Marcus continued, his voice carrying easily through the theatre. "Don't you think you're a little old to be playing dress-up? A little past your expiration date for the tribute circuit?" The male judge joined in, his voice dripping with condescension. "I mean, honestly, we're looking for fresh faces, not desperate housewives trying to escape their boring lives." Lucy felt every word like a physical blow, but something inside her hardened instead of breaking. These men didn't know her story. They didn't know about the nights she had worked double shifts to pay for her children's clothes, or the songs she had sung to comfort them when they missed their father, or the dreams she had carried like a flame in her chest for over 20 years. "I'd still like to perform my song," she said, surprising everyone including herself with the steel in her voice. Marcus laughed again, but he gestured for her to continue. "By all means, entertain us. Though I warn you, we've heard fancy about 50 times today, and frankly, we're not impressed with any of the interpretations." Lucy closed her eyes for just a moment, blocking out the harsh lights and the cruel faces and the empty seats filled with the ghosts of her shattered confidence. She thought about Tommy and Sarah, sleeping safely in their beds back in Nashville, trusting their mother to make their lives better. She thought about the guitar she had sold, the sacrifice that had brought her to this moment, and then she began to sing. Her voice, rich and powerful and achingly familiar, filled the theatre like liquid gold. The opening notes of Fancy soared into the rafters, carrying with them all the pain and hope and desperate love of a woman who had nothing left to lose. She sang about transformation, about a young girl who refused to accept the limitations the world tried to place on her, about rising above circumstances that seemed impossible to overcome. The judges stopped whispering. The theatre fell completely silent, except for Lucy's voice, which seemed to grow stronger and more confident with each verse. For 4 minutes and 30 seconds, she was not a broke waitress in a cheap dress. She was a storyteller, a force of nature, a woman reclaiming her power through pure artistry. When the last note faded into silence, Lucy opened her eyes to see Marcus Reynolds staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. For a moment she dared to hope that her talent had spoken louder than his prejudices. Then he began to clap, slow mocking applause that echoed through the empty theatre like gunshots. "Well, well," he said, standing up from his chair, "that was adequate. You can carry a tune, I'll give you that. But let's be honest here. There are 1,000 women who can sing Reba songs. What makes you think you're special?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Lucy opened her mouth to answer, to defend herself, to explain why her interpretation was unique. But Marcus wasn't finished. "The truth is, sweetheart, you're exactly what's wrong with the tribute industry. Middle-aged wannabes who think that sounding like someone famous makes them worthy of attention. The audience wants youth, energy, sex appeal. They want to see their fantasies brought to life, not their disappointments. Each word was calculated to hurt, and they found their mark." Lucy felt her carefully constructed confidence crumbling, the armor of her dreams proving as fragile as tissue paper against the sharp edges of Hollywood reality. "Thank you for your time," the female judge said with false sweetness. "We'll be in touch." It was the universal language of rejection, spoken in every industry across every city where dreams came to die. Lucy nodded numbly and walked toward the exit, her heels echoing in the now hostile space. Behind her, she heard Marcus say to his companions, "Next time we should set an age limit, save everyone some embarrassment." The laughter that followed her off the stage would haunt her dreams for weeks to come. Lucy made it to the theater lobby before the tears started, and to the bathroom before they became an unstoppable flood. She locked herself in a stall and wept for everything she had lost. Her grandfather's guitar, her children's tournament fees, her last shot at the life she had always wanted. But most of all, she cried for the girl she had been at 16, singing into her hairbrush and believing that talent and determination were enough to overcome any obstacle. That girl had died somewhere between the harsh lights of the Paramount Theatre stage and the cruel laughter of Marcus Reynolds. In her red sequined dress, now damp with tears and the bitter taste of failure, Lucy Jenkins sat in a bathroom stall in Los Angeles and tried to figure out how to go home and face her children with nothing but disappointment and debt to show for her grand adventure. She had no idea that just a few feet away in the theater's green room, someone had been listening to every word of her audition. Someone who was about to change everything. The bathroom tiles were cold against Lucy's cheek as she leaned against the stall door, trying to muffle the sounds of her heartbreak. The red sequins of her dress caught the harsh fluorescent light, creating tiny rainbows that mocked her devastation. She had cried until her throat was raw, until her carefully applied makeup had streaked down her face like war paint from a battle she had already lost. 15 minutes. That's how long her dream had lasted, from the moment she stepped onto that stage until Marcus Reynolds had delivered the final blow. 15 minutes to undo 15 years of hope, practice, and desperate believing that somehow, someway, her voice would be her salvation. Her phone buzzed in her purse, a text from her mother, Eleanor. "How did it go, honey? The kids are asking when you'll call." Lucy stared at the message, her vision blurring with fresh tears. How could she tell her children that their mother had failed spectacularly? How could she look Tommy in the eye and explain that she had sold their grandfather's guitar for nothing more than the privilege of being humiliated on a Los Angeles stage? The bathroom door opened with a soft creak, and Lucy quickly pulled her feet up, hoping whoever had entered wouldn't notice the occupied stall. She held her breath, praying they would leave quickly so she could continue falling apart in private. But instead of the sound of departure, she heard a gentle voice ask, "Honey, are you all right in there?" The accent was unmistakably southern, warm and rich like honey over biscuits. Lucy's heart stopped for a moment. There was something achingly familiar about that voice, something that reminded her of home and comfort and everything she had been searching for. "I'm fine," Lucy managed to croak, though the wobble in her voice betrayed her completely. "Now, darling, I may not know you, but I know the sound of a woman whose heart is breaking," the voice continued. "And judging by that beautiful dress I saw you wearing on stage and the way you sang fancy like you were born to it, I'd say you're Lucy Jenkins from Nashville, Tennessee." Lucy's blood turned to ice water in her veins. Someone had watched her audition. Someone had followed her to the bathroom to witness her complete humiliation. She pressed her face harder against the stall door, wishing she could disappear entirely. "Please," she whispered, "I just want to be left alone." "I understand that feeling, believe me," the woman said, and Lucy could hear her moving closer to the stall. "But sometimes, when we're at our lowest point, that's exactly when we need someone to remind us of who we really are." There was something in the tone, something in the cadence and the way certain words were emphasized, that made Lucy's pulse quicken with a recognition too impossible to believe. She fumbled with the lock on the stall door, her hands shaking so badly she could barely manage the simple task. When the door finally swung open, Lucy found herself face to face with her own reflection, or what she had always imagined her reflection might look like if dreams had the power to reshape reality. Standing before her, wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt, with her famous red hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, was Reba McEntire herself. Lucy's legs gave out completely. She would have collapsed to the bathroom floor if Reba hadn't reached out and caught her, strong arms wrapping around her shoulders and pulling her upright. "Easy there, sweetheart," Reba said with a gentle laugh. "I know I'm not that scary in person." You're really—" Lucy couldn't form complete sentences. Her brain had short-circuited somewhere between recognition and disbelief. "I'm really here, and you're really talented, and what happened out there was really unfair," Reba said, guiding Lucy over to the small bench near the bathroom mirrors. "Sit down for a minute and catch your breath." Lucy perched on the edge of the bench, staring at her idol with the same expression she might have worn if aliens had landed in the Paramount Theatre lobby. Reba McEntire, the actual real living legend, was standing in a bathroom, comforting a failed tribute artist who had just been publicly humiliated. "What are you doing here?" Lucy asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was scheduled to do a surprise interview with the producers about their tribute show concept," Reba explained, pulling a tissue from her purse and gently dabbing at Lucy's tear-stained cheeks. "I was in the green room when I heard your audition through the speakers. They have the sound system connected throughout the building, so the technical crew can monitor performances." Lucy's mortification deepened. Not only had she been rejected and insulted, but her idol had witnessed every moment of it. "I heard every word that man said to you," Reba continued, her voice hardening with an edge Lucy had never heard in any of her recordings. "And I want you to know that Marcus Reynolds is a fool who wouldn't recognize real talent if it bit him on his pretentious behind. The unexpected profanity from the woman Lucy had always imagined as perfectly polished and professional made her laugh despite everything, a short hiccuping sound that was half sob and half genuine amusement. "I heard something else too," Reba said, settling onto the bench beside Lucy. "I heard a woman who understands what fancy is really about. Not the flashy costume or the catchy melody, but the heart of it. The story of someone who refuses to let circumstances define her limits." Lucy shook her head, fresh tears threatening. "But I did let them define me. I let that man reduce me to nothing but my age and my appearance. I let him make me feel small." "No, honey, you didn't," Reba said firmly. "You finished your song. Even after he tried to tear you down, even after those other two joined in with their cruelty, you sang every note with power and dignity. That takes more strength than walking away would have." "It doesn't matter now," Lucy said, staring down at her hands. "I spent everything I had to come here. I sold my grandfather's guitar, the one thing I owned that meant something. And for what? To be told I'm too old and desperate." Reba was quiet for a long moment, and when Lucy glanced up, she saw something burning in those famous blue eyes, something that looked like righteous anger mixed with determination. "Tell me about that guitar," Reba said. So Lucy did. Through halting words and more tears, she told Reba about her grandfather who had taught her to play, about the late nights learning chords by candlelight when the electricity was shut off, about singing lullabies to her babies with that guitar cradled in her lap. She told her about working double shifts at Murphy's Diner, about Tommy's soccer tournament and Sarah's bedtime stories, about the impossible choice between her children's immediate needs and her own fading dreams. Reba listened to every word without interruption, occasionally nodding or making soft sounds of understanding. When Lucy finally ran out of words, exhausted by the emotional purging, Reba stood up and walked to the mirror. "Lucy Jenkins," she said, meeting Lucy's eyes in the reflection, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." Lucy nodded, not trusting her voice. "If I told you that voice of yours, that raw, honest, powerful instrument you were born with, if I told you it was special enough to share stages with some of the biggest names in country music, would you believe me?" I don't know," Lucy admitted. "An hour ago I thought I had something special. Now I feel like I was just fooling myself." Reba turned around, crossing her arms and fixing Lucy with a look that was equal parts compassionate and challenging. "Well, I'm about to prove to you that you weren't fooling anybody, except maybe yourself about how good you really are." She walked back to Lucy and extended her hand. "Come with me." "Where are we going?" Lucy asked, though she was already reaching out to take Reba's hand. "Back to that stage," Reba said with a smile that held promises Lucy didn't dare interpret. "Because I think Marcus Reynolds and his little panel of critics need to understand what real talent looks like when it's standing right in front of them." Lucy's heart began pounding again, but this time it wasn't entirely from fear. "I can't go back out there. Not after what happened." "Yes, you can," Reba said, pulling Lucy to her feet. "Because this time you won't be going alone." As they walked toward the bathroom door, Reba paused and looked Lucy up and down with the appraising eye of someone who had spent decades in the entertainment industry. "That dress is perfect, by the way," she said with genuine admiration. "Very 1986 whoever's in New England era. You've got good instincts." The compliment from her idol sent a warm flush through Lucy's chest, the first genuinely good feeling she'd had since stepping off the plane in Los Angeles. They made it as far as the lobby before Lucy's nerve began to fail again. "Reba, I don't think I can do this. What if he humiliates me again? What if he doesn't?" Reba interrupted gently. "What if this is the moment your whole life has been leading up to? What if walking back into that theater isn't the end of your dream, but the beginning of everything you never dared to hope for?" Lucy looked at her idol, this woman who had built an empire on talent, determination, and the courage to be authentically herself in an industry that tried to reduce everyone to marketable categories. In Reba's eyes, she saw something she had forgotten existed, the reflection of her own worth. "Okay," Lucy said, squaring her shoulders and lifting her chin. "Let's go show them what they missed." As they walked through the theater doors together, Lucy had no idea that the next 15 minutes would not only redeem the previous 15, but would launch her into a future so bright it would make her old dreams seem small by comparison. But first, Marcus Reynolds was about to learn that some people's opinions matter more than others, and the Queen of Country Music had some very strong opinions about how her fans should be treated. The stage lights were still blazing, the three judges still sitting at their folding table, probably preparing to crush the dreams of the next hopeful contestant. They looked up as the doors opened, and Lucy watched Marcus's face cycle through confusion, recognition, and something that might have been panic as he realized who was walking toward him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reba announced in a voice that carried every ounce of authority she had earned over 3 decades in the music business, "I believe you owe this young lady another listen." The revolution was about to begin, and Lucy Jenkins was no longer fighting it alone. The silence that fell over the Paramount Theatre was the kind that happens right before lightning strikes. Marcus Reynolds sat frozen at his folding table, his mouth slightly open, his phone forgotten in his hand as he stared at the 2 women who had just entered his domain. The other 2 judges looked like deer caught in headlights, their earlier smugness evaporating faster than morning dew in the desert. Lucy felt her knees wobble again, but this time Reba's steady presence beside her kept her upright. The Queen of Country Music walked with the confidence of someone who had earned her place in music history, her casual jeans and t-shirt somehow commanding more respect than all the expensive suits and designer dresses in Los Angeles combined. "Ms. McEntire," Marcus finally managed, scrambling to his feet so quickly he knocked over his coffee cup. The dark liquid spread across his notes like spilled ink, ruining whatever cruel comments he had been preparing for the next contestant. "What an unexpected honor. I had no idea you were in the building." "Oh, I've been here for quite a while," Reba replied, her voice carrying the deceptively sweet tone that anyone familiar with her music knew could cut like a blade when necessary. "Long enough to hear how you've been treating the artists auditioning for your little show." The female judge, a blonde woman whose name Lucy had never caught, attempted a bright smile that looked more like a grimace. "We're just trying to maintain professional standards, Ms. McEntire. You understand how important it is to find the right talent for—" "The right talent?" Reba interrupted, raising one perfectly shaped eyebrow. "You mean like Lucy here, who just delivered one of the most authentic performances of fancy I've heard in 20 years. Marcus cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation that was rapidly spinning away from him. "With all due respect, Ms. McEntire, we have very specific criteria for this production. We're looking for performers who can appeal to a broad demographic, who have the right energy for today's audiences." "Energy," Reba repeated, the word dripping with disdain. "Is that what you call it when you told this talented woman she was too old and desperate? When you laughed at her dedication and mocked her dreams?" Lucy watched the exchange with a mixture of terror and awe. She had fantasized about moments like this, someone standing up for her, defending her worth, recognizing her talent, but she had never imagined it would be Reba McEntire herself, facing down the Hollywood machine that had just chewed her up and spit her out. The male judge, apparently deciding that attack was the best defense, leaned forward with an oily smile. "Look, we appreciate your passion for supporting fellow artists, but business is business. We have investors to consider, market research that shows—" "Market research?" Reba's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Honey, I've been in this business since before you were born, and let me tell you something about market research. It can't measure heart, it can't quantify soul, and it sure can't predict which performances will make people feel something real in a world full of manufactured emotion." She stepped closer to the judges' table, her presence filling the space like a force of nature. "Lucy Jenkins has something you can't buy, package, or focus group into existence. She has authenticity. She has lived every word of every song she sings, and when she opens her mouth, people don't just hear music, they hear truth." Marcus's face was flushing red. Whether from embarrassment or anger, Lucy couldn't tell. "Ms. McEntire, I understand you want to support a fellow artist, but surely you can see that she lacks the polish, the professional presentation that—" "The Polish?" Reba's voice rose slightly, and Lucy recognized the tone from some of her more passionate ballads. "You want to talk about Polish? Let me tell you about Polish, Marcus. Polish is what happens when someone takes their natural talent and refines it through years of hard work, dedication, and perseverance. Polish is what Lucy has been developing while working double shifts to feed her children, and still finding time to perfect her craft." She gestured toward Lucy, who felt simultaneously exposed and protected under her idol's fierce advocacy. "This woman sold her grandfather's guitar, a priceless family heirloom, to afford the chance to audition for you. She left her 2 young children with their grandmother and spent her life savings on a dream. That's not desperation, that's courage. That's the kind of sacrifice that separates real artists from wannabes. The blonde judge tried once more to interject. But Ms. McEntire, surely you understand that there are hundreds of tribute artists. What makes her particular, Reba said, whirling to face the woman with eyes blazing, is that when she sings my songs, she doesn't just imitate them, she inhabits them. She understands that country music isn't about perfect pitch or flawless choreography. It's about telling stories that matter, connecting with people who need to hear that they're not alone in their struggles. Lucy felt tears building again, but these were different from the tears of humiliation she had shed in the bathroom. These were tears of recognition, of finally being seen and understood by someone whose opinion mattered more than all the critics and industry gatekeepers combined. Reba turned back to Marcus, her voice dropping to a more conversational tone that somehow seemed more dangerous than her earlier anger. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to give Lucy another audition. A fair one this time, without the commentary about her age or her appearance or whatever other irrelevant factors you've been using to dismiss genuine talent. I don't think that's necessary, Marcus began, but Reba held up a hand that stopped him mid-sentence. And furthermore, she continued as if he hadn't spoken, I'm going to join her for a duet, because I want you to hear what happens when 2 voices that understand the heart of country music come together. The theater fell silent again. Lucy's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it echoing off the ornate walls. A duet. With Reba McEntire, the woman whose voice had been the soundtrack to her dreams for over 20 years. I couldn't, Lucy whispered, the first words she had spoken since entering the theater. I'm not worthy of sharing a stage with you. Reba turned to her with a smile that was pure warmth and understanding. Honey, worthiness isn't something other people get to decide for you. It's something you claim for yourself, and right now I'm asking you to claim it. She walked over to Lucy and took her hands, the same hands that had trembled with nerves just an hour ago. Besides, I have a feeling that when we sing together, magic is going to happen. The kind of magic these people have forgotten how to recognize. Marcus looked like he wanted to object, but the presence of one of country music's biggest legends in his theater had effectively neutered his authority. The other judges sat in stunned silence, probably calculating how much trouble they would be in if word got out that they had insulted an artist under Reba McEntire's protection. What song would you like to perform? Reba asked Lucy, her voice gentle and encouraging. Lucy's mind raced through the catalogue of Reba's hits, trying to choose something that would showcase both their voices while telling a story that mattered. Then it came to her, the perfect choice. A song that spoke to everything she was feeling in this moment. Does he love you? She said, her voice growing stronger with each word. If you're willing. Reba's smile widened. Perfect choice. That song is all about 2 women finding their strength through truth, even when that truth is difficult to face. They walked to the center of the stage together, and Lucy felt a transformation beginning inside her. The harsh lights that had felt like interrogation lamps during her first audition now seemed like spotlights welcoming her home. The empty seats no longer looked like a void of indifference. They looked like possibilities, like all the people who might one day hear her voice and feel less alone in the world. You take the first verse, Reba said quietly, positioning herself slightly behind Lucy. I'll come in on the chorus and then we'll trade off. Just sing it like you mean it, like your life depends on it. Lucy nodded, closing her eyes for a moment to center herself. When she opened them, she looked directly at Marcus Reynolds and his panel of critics. This time she wouldn't be singing for their approval. She would be singing for every woman who had been told she was too old, too desperate, too ordinary to chase her dreams. The opening notes seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her vocal cords, rising from a place in her soul that had been wounded but not broken by the day's earlier cruelty. Her voice filled the theater with a richness and power that made the previous audition seem like a warm-up exercise. Tell me, does he love you like he used to? She sang, the words carrying all the pain and hope and determination of her 35 years of living. When Reba joined her on the chorus, something extraordinary happened. Their voices didn't just harmonize, they became something greater than the sum of their parts. Lucy's earthier tone grounded Reba's soaring melody, while Reba's experience and polish elevated Lucy's raw emotion into something transcendent. The judges sat transfixed. Marcus's earlier sneer had been replaced by an expression of grudging amazement. The blonde woman was leaning forward in her chair, her phone forgotten as she listened to a performance that was rewriting every assumption she had made about talent and authenticity. As they traded verses, Lucy found herself looking directly at Reba during the more emotional passages, drawing strength from her idol's encouraging nods and warm smiles. This wasn't just a performance. It was a conversation between two artists who understood that music was about more than entertainment. It was about connection, healing, and the courage to be vulnerable in front of strangers. When they reached the final chorus, singing together in perfect harmony, Lucy felt something click into place inside her chest. This was who she was meant to be. Not a pale imitation of someone else's success, but a fully realized artist in her own right, worthy of sharing stages with legends. The last note faded into a silence so complete it seemed like the theater itself was holding its breath. Then, from somewhere in the empty seats, came the sound of slow, deliberate clapping. Lucy looked up to see a janitor who had stopped his work to listen, tears streaming down his weathered face as he applauded their performance. Reba reached over and squeezed Lucy's hand, her eyes shining with pride and satisfaction. "Now that," she said loudly enough for the judges to hear, "is what real talent sounds like." Marcus Reynolds sat in stunned silence, his earlier arrogance completely deflated. When he finally spoke, his voice was subdued, almost respectful. "That was unexpected." "What was unexpected?" Reba replied, her protective instincts still fully engaged. "Was your inability to recognize it the first time around." She turned to address all three judges, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned the right to speak for the industry she had helped shape. "This woman has more talent in her little finger than most of the polished, manufactured performers you've probably approved today. The question isn't whether she's good enough for your show. The question is whether your show is worthy of her." Lucy felt a surge of empowerment unlike anything she had ever experienced. Standing on that stage, with Reba McEntire's arm around her shoulders and the echoes of their duet still reverberating through the theater, she finally understood what her idol had been trying to tell her in the bathroom. She wasn't too old, too desperate, or too ordinary. She was exactly who she was meant to be: a storyteller, a voice for women who had been overlooked and underestimated, a living reminder that dreams don't have expiration dates. But as powerful as this moment was, Lucy sensed that it was only the beginning. Reba had something else in mind, something that would transform this confrontation from a simple vindication into an opportunity that would change everything. The Queen of Country Music wasn't finished with Marcus Reynolds yet, and Lucy had a feeling that whatever came next would be even more surprising than anything that had already happened. The power in Reba's stance told everyone in the theater that she was far from finished. Lucy could see it in the set of her shoulders, the slight narrowing of her eyes as she regarded Marcus Reynolds with the kind of look that had probably intimidated record executives and network television producers for decades. "Actually, Marcus," Reba said, her voice taking on a tone that was almost conversational, which somehow made it more intimidating than her earlier anger, "I think we need to have a little chat about your business model." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly sensing that this conversation was about to take a turn he wouldn't like. "Ms. McEntire, I'm not sure what you mean." "Oh, I think you know exactly what I mean," Reba interrupted smoothly. "See, I've been in this industry long enough to recognize when someone is more interested in exploitation than entertainment. Your tribute show isn't about celebrating the artist who built country music. It's about finding cheap imitations you can control and underpay." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a campfire, impossible to ignore, and growing stronger by the second. Lucy watched as the other judges exchanged nervous glances, probably wondering if their boss was about to drag them into legal trouble. "That's a serious accusation," Marcus said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I've been producing successful shows for 15 years. "Successful for who?" Reba shot back. "Because I've been asking around about your previous productions, and I'm hearing some interesting stories about contracts that favor the house, performers who never see their promised percentages, and talent that mysteriously gets replaced when they start asking questions about their compensation." Lucy felt her breath catch. She had been so focused on the audition itself that she hadn't even thought to research the man who held her dreams in his hands. But Reba, with the wisdom and connections of someone who had navigated the industry's treacherous waters for decades, had clearly done her homework. "You can't prove any of that," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Can't I?" Reba reached into her back pocket and pulled out her phone. "Because I've got about 6 former performers from your last tribute show who are very interested in sharing their experiences with the right people, the kind of people who write for industry publications and have large social media followings." The threat was delivered with such casual elegance that it took a moment for its full impact to sink in. When it did, Marcus went pale, realizing that he wasn't just dealing with an angry artist. He was facing someone who could destroy his reputation with a few well-placed phone calls. "What do you want?" he asked, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. Reba smiled, and Lucy recognized the expression from some of her favorite music videos, the look of a woman who was about to get exactly what she wanted. "What I want is simple. You're going to apologize to Lucy for your unprofessional behavior. You're going to offer her a contract for your tribute show, a fair contract, with appropriate compensation and no exploitative clauses." "And if I refuse?" Marcus asked, though they all knew he was grasping at straws. "Then I make some phone calls, and by tomorrow morning every entertainment blog and industry publication in the country will be running stories about Marcus Reynolds and his questionable business practices," Reba replied matter-of-factly. "Your investors will pull out, your venues will cancel their bookings, and you'll be lucky to produce karaoke nights at dive bars." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Marcus's nervous breathing. Lucy found herself almost feeling sorry for him. Almost, but not quite. The memory of his cruel laughter was still too fresh, too painful to inspire much sympathy. "However," Reba continued, her tone softening slightly, "I'm not interested in destroying anyone's livelihood. I'm interested in making sure talented artists like Lucy get the opportunities they deserve. Work with me, and this unpleasant conversation stays between us." Marcus looked at his fellow judges, who were studiously avoiding eye contact, clearly unwilling to go down with his sinking ship. Finally, he turned back to Lucy, his expression a mixture of defeat and grudging respect. "Miss Jenkins," he said, the words obviously difficult for him to form, "I apologize for my earlier comments. They were unprofessional and inappropriate. I would like to offer you a position in our tribute show, with full headliner status and compensation commensurate with your talent." The apology felt hollow, motivated by fear rather than genuine remorse, but Lucy found she didn't care about Marcus's motivations. What mattered was that Reba had fought for her, had seen her worth when the people in charge of her dreams had been blind to it. But as Lucy opened her mouth to accept the offer, Reba held up a hand. "That's very generous, Marcus," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, "but I'm afraid I have a better offer for Lucy." Lucy's heart stopped. A better offer? From Reba McEntire herself? Reba turned to face Lucy, and suddenly the theatre, the judges, and all the afternoon's drama seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them, teacher and student, legend and dreamer, standing in a circle of stage light that felt like destiny made visible. "Lucy Jenkins," Reba said, her voice warm and filled with possibilities, "I have been looking for someone to join my upcoming tour as a special guest performer, someone who understands that country music is about storytelling, about connecting with people's hearts, about proving that dreams don't have expiration dates." Lucy's knees went weak again, but this time it wasn't from fear or disappointment. It was from the sheer impossibility of what she was hearing. "I don't understand," she managed to whisper. "I'm offering you a chance to perform with me," Reba explained, her eyes shining with excitement. 6 months of touring across the country, performing for audiences who will appreciate your talent, learning from musicians who have spent their lives perfecting their craft. You'll open shows, participate in duets, and have the opportunity to build a fan base that will support your career for years to come. The offer was so far beyond anything Lucy had dared to dream that her brain struggled to process it. This morning, she had been a failed auditionee crying in a bathroom. Now the Queen of Country Music was inviting her to share stages across America. "But why?" Lucy asked, her voice cracking with emotion. "Why me?" Reba's smile was radiant, filled with the same warmth Lucy had always heard in her recordings, but had never imagined experiencing in person. "Because when you sang Fancy earlier, even in the face of that man's cruelty, You reminded me why I fell in love with country music in the first place. Because your voice carries the stories of every woman who has ever been told she wasn't good enough, young enough, or perfect enough to chase her dreams. Because you sold your grandfather's guitar, your most precious possession, for the chance to sing. And that kind of sacrifice deserves to be rewarded. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, pressing it into Lucy's trembling hands. My manager's information is on there. Call her tomorrow morning and she'll arrange for you to fly to Nashville to discuss the details. We start rehearsals next week. Lucy stared at the card as if it might disappear if she blinked. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to waitresses from small-town diners. They didn't happen to single mothers who struggled to pay their electric bills. There's one more thing, Reba said, and Lucy looked up to see her reaching into her purse again. What she pulled out made Lucy gasp audibly. It was a guitar case, expensive-looking with brass fittings and Reba's initials embossed in gold lettering on the side. This was my first professional guitar, Reba explained as she handed the case to Lucy. A 1975 Martin D28 that I bought with the advance from my first recording contract. It's been with me through every major milestone of my career, my first hit, my first Grammy, my induction into the Hall of Fame. Lucy's hands shook as she accepted the case, feeling the weight of history and dreams realized. But guitars aren't meant to sit in closets collecting dust, Reba continued. They're meant to be played by artists who understand their value. I can't replace your grandfather's guitar, nothing could do that, but I can give you an instrument that will carry you forward into whatever comes next. Tears were streaming down Lucy's face now, and she didn't care who saw them. These weren't tears of humiliation or defeat. These were tears of gratitude, of wonder, of a future suddenly bright with possibilities she had never dared to imagine. I don't know how to thank you, Lucy said through her sobs. Don't thank me, Reba replied, pulling Lucy into a hug that felt like coming home. Just promise me you'll never let anyone make you feel small again. Promise me you'll remember this moment whenever doubt creeps in. You have a gift, Lucy Jenkins, and the world needs to hear it. As they embraced on the stage of the Paramount Theatre, with Marcus Reynolds and his judges looking on in stunned silence, Lucy felt something shift inside her chest. The scared, desperate woman who had entered this building hours earlier was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more confident, ready to claim her place in a world that had tried to convince her she didn't belong. 6 months later, Lucy Jenkins stood on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry, wearing a beautiful red dress that sparkled under the lights, and playing the guitar Reba McEntire had given her in a bathroom in Los Angeles. She had just finished performing Fancy to a standing ovation, and as she looked out at the crowd of faces lit by her performance, she spotted her children in the front row, Tommy and Sarah, beaming with pride as their mother lived the dream she had carried in her heart for 35 years. Beside them sat Eleanor, Lucy's mother, wiping away tears of joy as she watched her daughter prove that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. The tour with Reba had led to recording opportunities, to her own headlining shows, to a career that finally matched the size of her talent and the depth of her determination. But perhaps most importantly, Lucy had become something more valuable than a successful performer. She had become an inspiration to every woman who had been told her dreams had expiration dates, to every mother who had sacrificed her own ambitions for her children, to every person who'd been made to feel that their worth was determined by someone else's narrow definition of success. As she took her final bow that night, Lucy caught sight of a familiar figure in the wings. Reba McEntire was there, applauding along with the crowd, her face radiant with the satisfaction of someone who had recognized a diamond in the rough and helped polish it until it shone. Their eyes met across the stage, and in that moment, no words were needed. They both understood that what had begun with tears in a Los Angeles bathroom had become something beautiful, a reminder that sometimes, when one dream seems to die, it's actually being reborn as something even more magnificent than we ever dared to imagine. Lucy Jenkins had finally found her voice, and the world was listening.